Well, I got a girl pregnant when I was young. I was still in college and I was not ready to be a father. But I did my best. I manned up and I did it. Well, can you imagine my surprise when I find out that the girl I got pregnant, which is now my wife, decides to flee the country, running away with my two beautiful babies, my twins. And not only that, she took a priceless artifact that was part of my family for generations. And well, I'm not gonna let it slide. It's been 15 years and I've been hunting her down. And I found her.
One major characteristic of teenagers is that they never listen. They're always in a hurry, and I grew up with my sister Rose in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We were orphaned at a young age, so we were all that we had. Our parents were prominent business people in town, and they left behind 2 heirlooms for the both of us. The heirlooms had a great market value, but my sister and I had enough to keep us going. There was no need to sell them off. Besides, they were of sentimental value to both of us. My sister and I were both in college. While she was focused on her studies and all, I was focused on the ladies. Well, guys would always be guys, I guess, and the college was not that far from our house, so we both went from home. My sister went from home as I was only in school during the period of exams. There was always a party or two for me to attend, and I never missed. My sister did her best to advise me to steer me towards the right path, but there was nothing she could do as our parents were no longer around. It was during one of my escapades at a party that I crossed paths with Ava. We were both young and wild, and threw caution to the wind. I didn't know much about Ava's parents or family at the time, and I simply did not care. I was just in it for the fun. After several careless nights of recklessness, I got her pregnant. The whole energy and excitement dissipated the moment I received the news that I would be a father soon. Gosh, it was just too soon. I was not myself for days. I stayed indoors while pondering on what to do, and my sister could tell there was something wrong with her brother, who barely missed out on any party. I had enjoyed the moments I spent with Ava, but I did not see myself fathering a child with her. I suggested to her, we should get rid of the baby. She refused. She said if I did not turn her down when she opened her legs for me, then I was to be a man and stand up for my responsibilities. It was more like she enjoyed the prospect of bearing my child. I was the popular kid whose parents have left a small fortune behind, and I think it would have inspired her to want to keep the child because she remarked on me having money to take care of her and the baby. I finally decided to tell my sister. There was absolutely no point in even hiding it, so Ava could show up on our doorstep with a protruding belly. My sister was mad. What angered her was not the fact that I had gotten Ava pregnant. It was the fact that each time she warned me to desist my careless lifestyle and focus more on my studies, I would pick a fight with her. Her anger only lasted the night, though, and she met the next morning and asked that I introduced Ava to her. My sister Rose was further disappointed when she met Ava. She claimed Ava lacked any home training. Well, I didn't argue that fact with her because a lady who had a proper upbringing would not be drinking and smoking in a club. Ava told my sister to not bother trying to get her to go to get rid of the baby, as she would not put her life on the line just to save us some face. My sister was stunned by her statement. Up until then, I hid the whole, get rid of the baby thing from Rose. My sister told her there was not going to be any sorts of that, but she would give birth and stay at her parents' place. It was then Ava revealed to us that her family stayed in Europe, but her aunt lived in our town. She claimed neither her aunt nor her family would want to take her in with the pregnancy. Rose was the more mature and rational one amongst us. She suggested that we visit Ava's aunt to relay the situation of things and find a way forward. Ava's aunt was one Madame Eunice. It was clear to me and my sister that the apple does not fall that far from the tree. Madame Eunice was disappointed. She began making comments which were suggestive of her wanting her niece to get rid of the baby, as her family was not well-to-do. She did not consider the fact that her niece could die in the process. Well, she was a woman in her late 40s and had no child. From the lifestyle she lived, I would not be too surprised if she was responsible for not having a child herself. Rose came straight and told her that getting rid of the baby was simply off the table, as we were not trained, so we did not deem it morally okay. It was then that Madame Eunice began asking about our background. It took her less than 2 minutes to deduce who we were. She suddenly began saying that I had put her niece in the family's way, and that the moral thing to do was to get married to her. Well, her suggestion hit me like a ton of rocks. I was just 22 years of age, and I was in no way ready to get married. Besides, I was still in college. My sister asked that we were given time to think about it, but Madame Eunice said that we were to act fast before it became clear to the public that her niece had become pregnant out of wedlock, and term her immoral. She used the immoral thing against us, and my sister and I finally succumbed to Madame Eunice's suggestion. It seemed the only responsible and moral thing to do at the time. Ava and I got married in a private ceremony that was witnessed by her aunt and my sister. Ava moved in with my sister and me after the wedding, and that's when it dawned on me that my life had begun. Marriage is not for the faint-hearted. Ava was lazy and dirty. My sister would often clash with her, but I always pleaded with Rose to please be a little more understanding as Ava was pregnant. My sister knew I was just trying to manage the situation, as my excuse for Ava was lame, because the pregnancy was no excuse to be dirty. She, however, overlooked it. I started avoiding my house like a plague. As someone who did not like studies, I began taking lectures seriously. Ava began kicking against it as she claimed she could not stay at home alone. She was pregnant, and I needed to be responsible for my own child, as my sister has advised. So I quit school. Besides, the whole pregnancy thing was taking a huge chunk out of resources, and my schooling was something I had to drop so Ava would be comfortable. My sacrifice about quitting school did not appease Ava. She began getting overly demanding. She would ask for things that were pricey, and she blamed it on my child. Rose was gradually losing her patience. I was glad when Ava got into her 9th month. It meant she would soon give birth, and the whole "give me this, buy me that" would come to an end. Oh boy, how mistaken I was. You see, Rose was the one who took Ava to the hospital the day her water broke. I'd gotten a job at this time because Ava's demands, was running me dry. And it wasn't fair that my sister would use her part of the inheritance to satisfy Ava's needs. She was already irritated as it was. I was at work when my sister came calling from the hospital. She asked me to come there as I was now a father. I found my way to the hospital, where I discovered that Ava had not just added to us. She had multiplied us. She had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. My kids brought to joy, and, they equally brought a lot of needs that needed to be met. I began taking on a job, and I could not ask Ava to do the same, as she had just given birth, so the load was on my neck. Thanks to Rose, who would often help out financially, she was taking the whole aunt thing very seriously. The birth of my children mended the fence between my sister and my wife just a bit. Rose was now more tolerant towards Ava, and she would clean the house and equally help us financially. Time flew by pretty quickly, and my kids were already 3 years old before we knew it. Rose had graduated from college and gotten a job in a different city, so she moved out. My sister leaving the house meant that whatever kind of assistance I was getting from her, either financially or physically, was gone. I was left with catering for my family of 4 while she still was doing the chores. I did not possess such a level of patience that overlooked the dirty house, and I began to get irritated. I would return home from work, only to find the house turned upside down with Ava doing nothing. I would then spend the next hour cleaning the entire house when I was supposed to be saving up energy for tomorrow's workday. I was not very pleased. I'd gone from being someone who had an inheritance to live on to someone who now took jobs to fend for his family. The only thing I had as an inheritance was the heirloom that my parents had left behind. This was a big change, and if I could adapt, I expected that Ava should have at least done the same by getting used to doing some chores after living with my sister and me all these years. I started talking to her about it, and she claimed she was doing her best. It was either I was blind or she was delusional. I'm sure, though, I'm not blind. My eyes are still intact, by the way. We soon began having occasional fights. She would make absurd demands for money, which I was struggling to get, and all her aim was focused on wanting to live in the wild. Well, she lived in when we met. I tried making her see the reason. I was still young. I still had my youthful strength coursing through my body, but I had to put all that aside just to be a perfect example for my children. This was the same thing I expected from Ava, but she was not willing to make that kind of sacrifice for our children. I fell out with Ava. One day when she asked that I gave her some of, $10,000 for no justifiable reason, I told her there's no such money anywhere for me, and even if there was, we had needs that required money. Ava flared up. She began accusing me of not taking good care of her and the kids, and she even claimed that I could sell the heirloom which my parents left behind for my sister and me, but I chose to keep it lying around, just wasting away while we suffered with the kids and hunger. I did not want to create a scene in front of our kids. I warned her to never suggest selling my heirlooms to me, as it was a no-go area. I rather told her to go and get a job like other ladies who supported their families. I left the house only to return and discover that Ava, my kids, and the heirloom were missing. The neighbors attested to seeing Ava leave with my kids, and I was confused. I didn't know what to do besides call my sister. My sister came home, and we both went to see Madame Eunice. Madame Eunice was unreceptive, and she said that if I had treated my wife right in the search situation, it would not have gotten to this point. After much pleading, Madame Eunice finally told me she had no idea where Ava was. I think she was lying. She just wanted to dismiss my sister and me, and I asked for the family address of Ava, but Madame Eunice claimed she didn't have it. Rose and I were about to leave her home when she said I should go and get a life, as Ava's moved on. Her statement meant she knew more than what she was willing to say, obviously. Well, I was shattered beyond words. My world crumbled before my eyes, and I became the most miserable man you could have ever met. I would write various letters to Ava and my children, and post them to the address of Madame Eunice's home. I lost interest in my work and would spend most of my time writing to my children and their mom. But there was no response for once. Rose was not happy my life was at a standstill, and she advised that I tried moving on, as there was virtually nothing I could do. Moving on was the hard part. I kept on sending letters till Madame Eunice moved out of our town. My sister went ahead to make something useful out of her life, and while I just engaged in a life of debauchery as an escapee route from the pain which I was feeling on the inside. Fortune soon smiled at her and she got married. Both she and her husband relocated to Europe to start their lives, so I was all alone. I refused to get married or have any more kids with any of the women I slept with. I could not account for the kids I had, so what was the point of getting more? My sister would occasionally call to find out how I was doing, and to equally persuade me to carry on with my life as I was still young. Each time she called, she hoped that I had taken her advice, but she was always disappointed to find out that I was still nursing the 15-year-old wound inflicted in my heart by the disappearance of my children. She quit trying. My sister recently called me to tell me some news that she hoped would cheer me up. She said she had been discussing my issue with her husband, and he advised her to hire the service of a local investigator there in Europe. This was something she did over a year ago, but refused to tell me, so she would not get my hopes up for anything if the investigator did not come up with something useful. The investigator's efforts yielded results, and he had the location of Ava and my kids. My sister confirmed it herself to have visited the grocery store which Ava owned and managed. She swore on our late parents' grave that she had seen Ava. We both agreed that I would travel down to Europe to go and meet Ava and my kids. It's been 15 years, and I hoped all the resentment that existed between us would have dissipated by now. My stay was supposed to be for 1 week, and I was to stay at my sister's place with her husband and kids. I didn't want to, but she insisted. So, I traveled down to Europe not knowing what to expect, and I just went with my sister down to Ava's grocery store. She still looked very beautiful. I mean, she was less than 40 years old. I was 40, but could be mistaken to be 50 from all the stress. Ava recognized me the instant she saw me, and she was not happy. She questioned what I was doing in Europe and how her grocery store of all places fell in my lap. I became mad and very instantly upset. She was asking me trash after running away with my kids in Heirloom for more than a decade. I told her I was there for my kids and the Heirloom. She claimed ignorance of the Heirloom and said I gave up my kids a long time ago. She demanded I left her store, but I refused. We were busy going back and forth with her, threatening to call security until Rose tried playing the intermediary. I was ready for whatever was to come. I left the US with my mind made up about not returning without making up with my kids. I did not suffer misery for 15 years to be denied access to them again. Rose tried talking sense into Ava, but she said she had moved on and I was to do the same. That was her business. She could move on, for all I care, but let her drop my kids while moving on. Ava remained stubborn. She had her security come to throw us out, but I was not deterred. Since I knew where her store was, I was determined to bug her and even trail her for the rest of my life till she granted me access to my children. Rose still suggested handling the matter amicably. Rose went back to the grocery store 2 days later to try to persuade Ava, just to change her mind. She reminded her that my kids have the right to know their father, and they were the ones to decide against knowing him. She pleaded with Ava to not rob them at the chance, and Ava accepted to set up a meeting between me and the children, but she had her conditions. She said I was to stay away from them as long as I lived if the kids did not want me to be part of their lives. Ava's condition is okay by me. I'm certain my kids would have missed me as I've missed them. It's not like there's been a father figure in their lives ever since their mother eloped with them. Besides, even if they were angry with me, I'm certain that their anger would vanish once I explained to them the reason I've been absent in their lives all these years. I would be going to see them in exactly 3 days. This has been my very goal for the past 15 years. Reuniting with my children. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is absolutely crazy. I mean, could you imagine losing your kids for 15 years and being on a big manhunt for them? Well, I have 4 updates to check out. If you guys are new to the channel, take a second right now. Hit that subscribe button, and let's jump into update number 1. I don't know if I want to be making this update. I can't seem to find the words to say the things I want to say. The mother of my kids have ruined things for me, and the possibility of having it fixed is really slim. My sister and I met with Ava at her place as agreed. I was seated in anxiety when my twin children walked in the parlor and engaged in conversation by themselves. It was like Rose and I were not even there. My children had grown big. My son looked like me, while his sister took after her mother. Well, I called out to my children, but they did not seem much at all, and they just winked in my direction. I was embarrassed, but I knew it was almost 2 decades, so there could be some form of resistance on their part. I stood up, just to approach them, and that's when my daughter screamed at me not to get too close. I was confused. I took a look at my son, and he agreed with his sister. So, I called them by name and told them it was I, their father. But they debunked what I was saying by telling me their father was dead. I thought they believed that I actually died years ago, so I told them it was I in the flesh. To my great surprise, my son told me I died to them the very day I compelled their mother to leave the house and live on the streets after she had turned her back on her family just for my sake. They went ahead to say I never bothered to reach out to them after all these years, and it was pointless coming back now as they didn't need me. You would not understand the kind of pain a father feels hearing his children say they don't need him. I looked at Ava in disbelief. What had she been feeding my kids? From what they had said, she painted me as the villain of the story. She made it look like I mistreated her right from the start, and my kids now hate me for it. The fact that she just stood back and watched my children tell me how disappointed they were, it shows that she's cooked up the whole thing. I tried reasoning with my kids that this whole thing's been a mix-up, but the more I attempted to speak, the more irritated they became. I wanted them to see their mother and have fed them lies about me, and I had spent most of my life looking for them all over the earth, but my sister did not want me playing the blame game with Ava. My kids were all grown up and had a mind of their own, a mind their mother had turned towards me, and Rose just advised I took my leave when my children threatened to call the cops on me. Yeah, that's right. It was very, very painful. My kids attempted to call the cops on me, and I'm currently at my sister's place while still contemplating what to do. Update number 2. These past few days have been the worst of my life. I've spent almost 2 decades searching for my children, but now that I found them, you could argue that I should not have wasted my life doing so. No father should have to go through what I've gone through these past few days. I'm still staying at my sister's place, and each time I see how great things are between her and the kids, I get reminded of the fact that mine almost called the cops on me. My sister Rose suggested that I meet separately with my kids and explain to them my exact version of the story, as their mother's been lying to them all along. So, I visit the house again when Ava was at the grocery store. My kids are done with high school, so they stay at home most of the time, just pending admission to college. My visit to the house was like the first time. My kids were not willing to hear me out. They kicked me out, but while they were at it, I informed them that all their mother had fed them about me over the years was lies. I dropped the telephone line of my sister's house where I stayed just in case they need to reach me. The way things turned out was not soothing in any way at all. I decided to talk to Ava. She had created this whole mess, and so if anyone could bring it to an end, she was the one. I went back to Ava's grocery store, and I pleaded with her to straighten things out between my kids and me. I told her I cared less about the heirloom, she can keep it. My kids were all that mattered to me now, and I don't know when I just broke down in tears crying. I was not asking Ava to come back into my life, so we would be one big happy family. No. I just wanted her to make my kids understand that their father was not the monster that they thought I was. Ava did not empathize with me at all. She even picked offense that I still thought she took the heirloom, thereby implying that she was a thief. She finally said to me that I should honor my agreement to stay away from her and our children, as long as I lived, and she just asked me to travel back to the US and never show my face again. I'm at a loss for words at this point, and I've done all I can think can be done. Do I just accept the fact that my kids have been lost forever? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Update number 3. Believe it or not, things have gotten better between my kids and me. The time I planned on staying in Europe was up, and I had to leave. The initial outcome of things was not encouraging, as I was on the verge of, harming myself. My sister had taken leave from work and suggested that I extended my stay so she could look after me. This is not the end of your life. You're just 40 and can still put your life in order, she always said. Well, I guess she was wrong. My life was in absolute shambles without my children, and I was about to bring it to an end, if not for the call which came in soon. My kids called my sister's home and they asked to speak with me. I was happy when they asked if we could meet later that day at a coffee shop nearby. I knew it had to do with me resurfacing back into their lives, and I became optimistic about the fact that the meeting would turn out the way I had always hoped. I get to the coffee shop early, and they were already seated there waiting for me. Their faces were dull, and they were not into exchanging pleasantries at that moment. They just asked that I explain to them my reason for abandoning them and their mother to face life all alone. Well, I began from the beginning. I told them about things that we faced and how we began just clashing along the way as a result of their mother's upbringing. I went ahead to tell how devastated I've been ever since the day their mother disappeared without a trace. I made sure to tell them about the letters and even recited some poems which I've written for them. I could see their eyes getting misty as I tried reciting the poems. They suddenly brought a box from their bag and asked if these were the letters I was talking about. I could not believe my eyes. The box which they brought out contained the very letters and poems that I've written to Ava and posted to the residence where Madame Eunice lived. Lest I forgot, Madame Eunice is dead. She passed on about 5 years ago, and if Madame Eunice never knew the address of Ava as she claimed, how come the letters were found in Ava's possession? I felt a rush of different emotions flood me, and I told my kids that their mother had probably worked hand in glove with Madame Eunice to keep them away from me, and to paint me to be the monster that they believed me to be. That was not all. In the box contained something that had been missing all these years. One of the heirlooms which my parents left me. It was mine, but the fact that it was in Ava's possession meant she knew where my sister's own was, and I did not tell my kids anything about the heirloom, but I asked that they let me take it since it was mine. I did not tell them that it was an inheritance that their mother stole from me, though. I left that out. I got home and showed the heirloom to my sister. She was absolutely enraged. She almost drove down to Ava's shop just to tear her to shreds if not for my intervention. I asked her, please, be patient, as revenge is what I'm going for. Update number 4. My time in Europe is almost up, and I'm thinking of relocating here permanently. Something dramatic occurred yesterday. I was at my sister's place, and for the first time in a long while, I could say I was happy, thanks to how the meeting with my children turned out. I was supposed to meet up with them when their mother Ava stormed my sister's house, screaming my name at the top of her lungs. You could almost think I had committed a heinous crime. She began questioning what I have said and done to her kids at the moment she saw me. I knew what she was talking about. She was talking about the letter which they discovered and the truth which I have told them. She began accusing me in front of everyone of poisoning the minds of her kids against her, and I blew hot. I reminded her that the kids she called hers were equally mine, and I never poisoned their hearts. They simply discovered the truth for themselves. The kids now resented and were keeping their distance from her, and she was already going mad. This was not even up to 3 days, but this was a fate that she had made me suffer for almost 2 decades. While Ava was still ranting, I pulled the heirloom out of my pocket and dropped it right there on the table. At that moment, her eyes grew big. I told her it was from the box of letters. The very heirloom she claimed to not possess, and Ava was absolutely shocked. Ava began pleading with me to forgive her and talk with her kids to do the same. I listened to her, but I had my demand. I told her to produce the other heirloom which belonged to my sister, but we were disappointed when she said that she sold the other one and used the money to set up her grocery store shop. My sister took over the whole thing. She immediately sent Ava out her home and gave her a 1-week ultimatum. Return the heirloom or get arrested. As for me, I had recorded the whole conversation, and I and Ava admitted to having sold the heirloom. I would be meeting with the kids tomorrow, where I would further make Ava out to be the villain, and though this would only make them hate her all the more, I could care less. Her concern should not be her kids. She should focus on my sister, because the chance of finding an heirloom sold over a decade in 1 week is very slim. I'm just glad I'm patching up things between my kids and me, even though it came at the expense of the relationship of their mother. So I leave you guys with this. Am I the a-hole for letting my kids hate their mother after she fled to another country with them years ago? Bad-mouthed me until my sister finally found them, and they discovered letters I wrote them every single day.
This story was nothing short of heartbreaking. You had Madame Eunice and Ava working together just to make them disappear with the kids. Could you imagine having to search for your kids for 15 years? And not only that, you lose a priceless heirloom that's been in the family for generations or decades. They don't even say how long, but a long time. I want to know, when you finally found her right there at that grocery store that she now owns, what would you do? Guys, drop your comments down below. This was one wild story, and I just want to discuss it with you guys. If you're new to the channel, I want to welcome you. My name's Mr. Reddito. I release a story every single day. So stop on by, see what we're up to. This story, though, was an absolute roller coaster, and I can't wait to hear from you guys. So make sure you drop your comments down below. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.